All right, I want to watch this new video. It's an Ashikai video. But basically, for those of you who were there when we did the Caribert quest, that quest like blew my fucking mind. And I want to know more about what everything means because I feel like there's so much lore about the game that I just don't know because I just don't know it. So we're gonna watch her first part 1 of 2 Caribert analysis, which 68K views in 1 day is fucking insane, by the way. People loved this quest. So I want to watch this analysis and we're gonna be Ashikai Analysis Gaming. All right.
I sure do love the smell of hot melted brains in the morning. And thanks to the Caribert Archon quest,
I also liked
there are
melted
a lot
brains.
of them to go around right about now. Talk about a mind-blowing quest, am I right? Some great reveals, newfound clarity, and a dozen new questions came out of this baby. So in this video,
It's true.
I want to talk about all of it. And
Ashikai's gonna save me.
A basic quest recap is going to come first, from which we will pick the most interesting topics to talk about in depth, and then finally we'll end the video with a roundup of all the little tidbits that are worth sharing but not really worth analyzing. And I do have a lot.
Okay.
But please note, I will not be talking about the Chatty Chasm Crystal in this video, mostly because I have so much to say about it that it needed its own video, and it kind of turned into its own complete theory, so consider that a part 2, if you will.
Okay, that makes sense. There's a part 2 of this, and I do want to watch the Chatty Chasm Crystal 1 too when that's out.
Coming soon. But with 2 videos to go, there's literally no more time to waste, so let's just get into it. We start the quest by meeting up with Kaeya at a local Sumeru tavern. While chatting with us, Kaeya reveals that he is of Khaenri'ahn descent, and as far as I know, this is the first time it's actually mentioned in a voiced quest. Now, if you don't read character stories or you miss some of the optional content from Diluc's Hidden Strife event, this should be the first time you learn about this, or at least get confirmation if you are suspicious about it. He also shares his last name, Albric. This reveal prompts Dainsleif to join the conversation. Now, Dain seems to have quite a bit of disdain for Kaeya, which is understandable when he reveals that the founder of the Abyss Order was in fact from the Albric family.
Monk W.
And Dain hates the Abyss Order.
Understandable,
now again,
have a nice day.
Strife, what you might not know here is that as well as having the founder of the Abyss Order within their family, the Albrics were a regent family that stepped up to rule Khaenri'ah when their king, King Ermin, was unable to do so. In other words, this family was important for more reasons than just founding the Abyss Order. One awkward conversation and the offer of a future drink later, Kaeya leaves and the Traveler is left alone with Dain.
I want to know what they talk about later.
Investigation into the Abyss Order's Loom of Fate operation, and after downing one Death in the Afternoon cocktail, they head off to Avidia Forest to track down the brand new lead. Their survey of the tiny hut and field doesn't
not the field.
Monster activity suggests potential ley line shenanigans, so off Dain goes on his own to investigate that. Paimon tells the Traveler to take a nap while they wait, and it's not a bad idea, really. But when the Traveler wakes up, Paimon is gone, but Dain is back. For a minute, anyway. And then he bounces again. And this is the point at which the Traveler starts to unknowingly...
Wait a second. At this point? Are we already in the dream at that point? Is that a flashback where the Traveler knows Dain? Like, because like Dain is like, at least my understanding is Dain is sort of like the Paimon to the other Traveler. So this was already, okay. I thought that this was a point where the Traveler hadn't yet gone into that dream state yet. So that's interesting.
Experience their twins' memories from several hundred years ago. That's why there's no Paimon here. It's just Dain. This is when the Abyss Twin was traveling with Dainsleif.
Yeah, okay, that's good foreshadowing, I guess.
Was when the Traveler, posing as the Abyss Twin, met Ida. Ida is emotionally unstable, to say the least, which makes sense. The curse he has, which is the same one as Dain,
can't believe our
inflict a lot of
can't believe our sibling won the 50-50 on Dain. That's crazy.
Pain and drive people insane. So that seems to be working. It doesn't help that he spent what seems to be a couple hundred years taking care of his son, Caribert, who was cursed and turned into a hilichurl. Ida thinks that this hilichurl curse can be broken and instructs the Traveler on how to make a potential medicine out of 2 plants, 1 weird mushroom,
this is gonna go so bad by the end of the game,
and a dendro archon blessing. The first dose doesn't work at all, so they try again. But before they can give it to Caribert, Ida spots a hilichurl he mistakes for his son and goes after it. They follow it into some old ruins in the chasm where it meets up with some other hilichurls. But the hilichurls are acting very strange, walking towards an unknown destination and periodically bowing down in reverence to some unseen thing. Near their destination, they run into a cryo-abyss herald who spouts some nonsense about fate, challenges the traveler to a fight, loses, and despite this, Ida is in awe of the herald, calling.
So from what I remember, I think Ashikai will get to this at some point. But from what I remember, Ida, or this guy, ends up being the old Abyss founder, right? Or is he a descendant of the founder of the Abyss? From what I remember, he was like supposedly one of the founders, right? I'm gonna wait for chat to answer this. It might be founder. Okay. So the reason I asked this is because that implies through this, assuming that he has not yet founded the Abyss, or maybe he has by this point. Maybe the Abyss was like present the entire time. But assuming that this is like how the Abyss comes into founding, that means that the cryo lector existed beforehand, which I just think is really interesting. He is the founder, yeah. So funny because Kaeya looks like a humanized Abyss mage and he descended from the Abyss. Monka W. Monka W. I just think it's interesting because he refers to the guy as like a perfect being, so it makes me think that like there's got to be some kind of weird time loop going on where the Abyss existed before him, but he founded the Abyss, but then it existed before, like the chicken and the egg thing. I feel like there has to be something like that going on, but maybe Ashikai will explain what she believes is going on. He's the founder of the Abyss Order. Okay, that is a good clarification. Me, a not lore person, trying to understand the Abyss lore.
It a
okay,
perfect
yeah, that's good
being.
to know.
But in the next room, they find a giant, ominous, chained talking crystal hanging from the ceiling, with the same vibes as the defiled statue that was found way back in the We Will Be Reunited quest.
Side note, a lot of people think that this was like really dark, and like it was probably one of the darkest things we had seen with like the dead dude right there. But like you got to remember that we like kill people all the time in this game. So like while it was like kind of eerie and like I didn't expect it, I feel like this is pretty tame compared to what we learn later.
Questline. The hilichurls and Ida fall to their knees in prayer, but the traveler does not, and that's when the floating smoke crystal talks to the traveler inside of their head. It asks some weird questions, calls itself a sinner and not a god,
Kakuna finality, where's Kiana?
At the end of time. I guess it's saying this to the Abyss Twin, but the Abyss Twin also went by the name Traveler, so this is gonna get really confusing. Before they leave, the crystal blesses Ida's anti-hilichurl medicine, and this blessing is enough to restore Caribert's clarity of mind upon administration.
This also I was unsure about. I didn't realize that it had blessed the Abyss hilichurl medicine. I thought that the medicine itself worked anyways, and that he just misattributed it to working because of him meeting that guy. So it's good to know that like is officially what happened.
Does not, however, fix his body. Caribert has a meltdown over his appearance, and while Ida does calm him down a little, he also gets some bad ideas. If the crystal can restore Caribert's mind, it can restore his body too, right? It's
Surely.
A real god, a real powerful entity.
Clueless.
Something he could put his faith into. But we'll never really know if it could do that because on the second trip to the Chasm Ruins, there is no crystal there at all. And when they return back to the hut, Caribert is also gone.
Crystal seems like
they
one
find him at the
entity,
edge of a cliff in a state of absolute despair after seeing what his face looks like beneath his mask. He loses control, tries to remove his mask, and erupts into an explosion of dark abyssal energy. The force knocks out the traveler, and when they wake up, Ida properly reveals that he is actually Clotar Elbrick and declares that for the fate of his son, he will turn Caribert into the loom of fate, one capable of weaving his own destiny. Clotar proceeds to drop a few more lore.
Sorry, another thing about it. I'm sure Ashikai's going to talk about all this stuff, but like the Loom of Fate and the whole Destiny thing, I think was really interesting because we experienced. If you guys did the Scaramouche questline, which I believe you had to do Caribert, but maybe not. Maybe you didn't have to do it. There's sort of an interesting thing there where Scaramouche gets erased from history. But he's not erased from history. His like who he is erased from history. But more or less, the world still turns out the same. And the stories turn out more or less the same. Which kind of paints this idea in my mind that like fate can't be changed in Teyvat. Whereas like they're talking about the Loom of Fate and the ability to change fate. So it's like everyone knows in Teyvat that like fate can't be changed. And so the whole purpose feels like they're like trying to change fate, and they're trying to figure out how to break that cycle, which I think is really interesting because it plays into a lot of the themes and things that they bring up randomly in quests but don't elaborate on, but it kind of circles back to that.
Bombs, claiming that he knows who the
Sitter
traveler
might be the
is.
big bad guy of the game.
He calls them the
Or the
prince
good-
or
good guy.
princess of Khaenri'ah, as well as their hope.
Fate's
and
emphasized
equates
in
them
Mona,
to the
too, yeah.
unknowable abyss. He says that whoever can control the abyss can control Teyvat, insinuating that the twins have this capability.
Specifically, sorry, going back to that other thing. Specifically, it kind of erases the idea that the butterfly effect exists. Like if you go back and you like remove someone or like change something drastically, things end up the same anyways. That's
He
what
calls
I'm
them
saying.
the prince or princess of Khaenri'ah, as well as their hope, and equates them to the unknowable abyss. He says that whoever can control the abyss can control Teyvat, insinuating that the twins have this capability. And this is when the traveler realizes that they've actually been witnessing their twins' memories, and suddenly they're back in their own time again. Dane and Paimon standing over them worriedly.
There it is.
Turns out the whole experience was caused by the Abyss Order tampering with the local ley lines. That's business as usual, I guess.
Yeah.
Dane then explains that Clotar Alberic founded the Abyss Order, ran it for about
Reminds me
100
of the
years
Echo
before he
from
lost
Final
his mind
Fantasy
entirely,
14.
and then promptly disappeared. The traveler suggests at this point that they dig up the field, which reveals two skeletons. One is identified as Clotar Alberic.
I didn't catch this in
and
my first
one is
playthrough.
identified as his wife. Well, it should be, anyway. With new knowledge in hand, Dane pieces out and the Traveler and Paimon are left on their own once again. Which means that we are now free to dig into the more interesting bits and analyze them.
Oh, I didn't pick up on the dead, like the dead people mushrooms. That took me a while. It makes me sad.
In there and squish them all around. Let's kick off this analysis by starting off with the Abyss twin, whose memories the Traveler was witnessing. The community at large really likes to argue over which twin is canonically the Traveler and which one is canonically the Abyss twin. The answer is both and neither. See, this quest kind of confirmed the idea that the twins think exactly alike.
That's
the
true.
words the Traveler spoke were the exact same ones that their twins spoke hundreds of years ago.
I also have this weird theory that memories have been tampered with, and there's actually only one Traveler, and the other Traveler basically changed their form and tied themselves to Teyvat in order to be a different person, because if they didn't, they would merge with Traveler when they were trying to change fate. So I have I have this theory that Lumine and Aether are actually one person that was turned into two different people, and the memories were tampered with so that you would remember it as two different people, when in reality one of them, Aether in this case, could be Lumine from the future come to the past to try to change things, but obviously two Lumines can't exist at once, otherwise the quests wouldn't work, because you would have to do Lumine's quest before you could access the quest that has Aether in it, because they would be the same person. No, I'm just kidding. That's a little meta, but you know what I mean? It's a weird theory, but I feel like it holds ground.
Their thoughts may have differed a little bit, which would make sense, but even then, their actions
This NPC is already
were
in one place.
identical. This whole thing was kind of already implied during the We Will Be Reunited quest, when the Abyss Twin confidently claimed the Traveler would reach the same conclusion that they did at the end of their journey.
Yeah, no,
Just
again,
means that the
this
twins themselves
also
are
means we could be the same
interchangeable.
person.
It's the journeys that make all the difference. The Traveler met Paimon first.
Also, unrelated, but or kind of related to that same tangent, the Traveler that is like Lumine, if they were gender bent Aether from the future that came back to try to change the past, maybe that, the fact that they're a different gender could also be a result of something of them trying to change fate too. So I don't know, it's a whole bunch of things.
First, and their entire experience is colored by her, whereas the Abyss Twin had Khaenri'ahn nobility and Dainsleif, I guess. Had the positions been reversed, and they are depending on who's playing, the outcomes would have been the same. Although I suppose you could kind of use this as more evidence that one twin is actually a clone of the other, and that they were never actually twins, and that their memories are all just falsely implanted, but that's kind of a little too conspiracy even for me.
Damn, I got called out, holy shit.
Something. I have no proof or anything to work with to back it up or refute it, so I'm gonna just leave it there. But speaking of journeys, I wanted to take a second look at the Abyss Twins' most probable timeline.
Theory that Dane is male traveler from the future. I've seen that one too.
Judging by the fact that Clothar had been alive for at least a couple of hundred years post-Cataclysm when they met the twin, and Dane was also present, we can now say with certainty that the twins' journey took place after the Cataclysm. That was something that was up in the air before, so this is nice. And that would line up with their appearance in Vanarana as Nara Varuna. Dane may not have been present with the Aranara because he might not have actually been able to see them, or the twin was trying to get a bija for him after he got corrupted or something, because that's what the bija is for, you know, healing. So it's actually like a big crystallized memory fruit kind of thing, which makes sense, because like if you're
I need to finish the Aranara world quest.
Memories go, like a bija would be really useful. But anyway, both of those things
up,
are
1010?
just theories. Don't take them as fact. The idea that Clothar had been alive for a couple hundred years is actually coming more from the idea that, you know, humans live for 100 years anyway, generally, roughly-ish.
Damn.
So living for 150 isn't really a big deal, but 200, 250,
True.
300,
Ask
that's when
Farazan.
I think you'd start to go a little bit mental. So I'm extrapolating based on that. So if we account for all of this new information, the order of events should look something more like this. The twins arrive in Khaenri'ah from space when the heavens responded to the summoning. One twin woke up and was declared Khaenri'ahn royalty. Then after a while, the events of the Cataclysm would take place, and the twin rushed to wake up their siblings so they could escape Teyvat. And upon escaping Teyvat, or trying to, and reaching the heavens, they were stopped by the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles, who either separated the twins by 500 years of time, or just a long distance of space. I'm not sure, it could be both. Either way, the twin would have then visited Sumeru.
That also might be why they're bound to Teyvat, is because they got caught
and meet Clothar.
By the Heavenly
Then the twin would
Principles.
have had a falling out with Dane and joined the Abyss Order. A long time after that, the traveler would have fished up Paimon and set off to find their sibling, and the game begins.
Going back to that, there's about to be another transition, so it's a good time to stop. So we know that like we're a descender, but our brother wasn't listed as a descender, but like clearly they were, maybe. I feel like when the Heavenly Principles got to them, it may have bound their fate to Teyvat, and so they've been trying to change their fate to be unbound to the fate of Teyvat, and they've been trying to change Teyvat's fate, but they can't because they're bound to Teyvat's fate, but we are not bound to that fate, and maybe we are the only ones that can change it. So they will go through the same loop every single time, but maybe because we're from outside, we can't affect things, and we have to figure it out, and that's going to be what we find out in patch 7.9 or something.
I'm still really curious about what
Our
caused
traveler
Dane and
isn't
the twin
tied to
split
Teyvat.
up when
Only
it
the
appears that
sibling.
The two had maintained a good relationship for what seems to be centuries after the Cataclysm ended. Dane didn't appear to be angry, so he's either feeling guilty or responsible or something along those lines. So did the twin confront him about the curse on Khaenri'ah after this event with Clothar and was, you know, given an answer by Dane that he didn't like?
Uh-oh.
Or did Dane disclose something he did or didn't do at a later date voluntarily that changed the twins' opinion of him? Like, I wonder if this was something similar to what happened between Kaeya and Diluc, where Kaeya would be a bit like Dane, feeling guilty over something and coming clean to Diluc about it at the exact wrong time. I'm leaning a bit more towards this answer right now, because now that we can confirm that the Abyss Twin was also a prince or princess of Khaenri'ah, Dane's title of Royal Guard might imply that it was his job or duty to protect the twins and not King Ermin or the Albricks. I could see a scenario where he might have gotten some priorities mixed up, neglecting to help people in favor of helping the twins. This is also supported by the idea that the Albric, Clothar, didn't seem to recognize the twins' companion in the memory, which should be Dainsleif.
True.
If someone from the Regent family doesn't recognize a royal guard, then it's probably likely that they weren't their guard, right? But hey, speaking of the Albricks, what a twist, right? Kaeya being part of the extended family that founded the Abyss Order, I really wasn't expecting that exactly.
Kaeya was
Now,
once an Abyss mage.
Kaeya was
Real.
tagged onto this quest, he definitely wasn't. And Kaeya's appearance here is definitely foreshadowing. In fact, it's foreshadowing for something that they've been setting up since 1.0. And what is that something, you might be wondering? Well,
Mona.
I suspect it's that Kaeya is, in fact, involved with the Abyss Order. If you think back to the Mondstadt chapter, there were already hints of this. For example, that time Kaeya sent the Traveler away while they were inside one of the temples so that he could be alone with an Abyss Mage. Yes, Diluc showed up and wiped it out before Kaeya could even do anything, but all that does is show that Diluc isn't even willing to listen to a word that the Abyss Order says, and likely
Understandable.
doesn't think
Bad
that
blood.
Kaeya should either. Then later on, Kaeya opts to not defend the city himself, despite the fact that they already knew exactly when the Abyss Order was planning to attack. Instead, he claims that he was scouting the city, following the trail of some very shadowy, suspicious figures. He even says that he fraternized with the enemy in order to get some intel. And he's also the very first person to tell us about the existence of the Abyss Order's leader, the Abyss Prince or Princess. Now, to be fair, it's equally likely that he captured and tortured an Abyss Mage to get that information, but
True.
he could have just as easily bargained for it. The way he says fraternized is kinda vague. Now, I'm not the first person to point out this suspicious behavior of his.
This is kind of sus.
See, and people often cite this one letter that
He
Kaeya
just
wrote
sounds
for
sus.
Venti during the first Windbloom event as evidence that he hates the gods. The letter had bits written in hilichurlian, specifically the phrase "mi muhe ye." A popular fan translation suggested this could be a threatening letter, as the phrase translated into "I triumph over you." However, while this translation was well-intentioned, it's just wrong. Shortly after Windbloom, we got the Mimi Tomo event, where we learned a lot more about hilichurlian. As it turns out, mi muhe ye means something more along the lines of "I want you." So Venti's translation of "I like you" is probably more accurate, although I do not deny that want can have both positive and negative connotations.
I
But
want
even still, I
to
don't
destroy
think
you.
this letter was a threat or a warning letter. Mostly because it doesn't actually add
Knights
up
of
with
Vavonis definitely
anything
good
else
guys.
that
Kaeya,
does. For example, Kaeya hangs out predominantly at Angel Share, and yes, I know he likes alcohol, and this is like the biggest alcohol distributor in the entire city, so that kind of makes sense, but also it's run by Diluc, and Diluc hates the Abyss Order, and I really don't think Diluc would let Kaeya hang around if, he was actively involved in the Abyss Order in a way that would harm Mondstadt.
That's true.
I personally trust Diluc to know what's up. And it's pretty clear that Diluc does trust Kaeya, because they do work together on occasion, and Diluc does trust the information that Kaeya gives him.
Read Genshin
Yes,
manga,
they've got
you'll
a lot
see
of
what I
personal
mean.
grievances to work out, which is probably why they don't work together a lot. But still, if Kaeya was working with the Abyss Order in a way that would harm Mondstadt or anything else around it, Diluc wouldn't do any of those things. It is probably likely that Diluc does not approve of Kaeya mingling with the Abyss Order, because why would you want a knight that's supposed to protect your city mingling with, their sworn enemy? But
It's true.
Kaeya is the type to leverage all available assets to get whatever intel he wants. And if that means infiltrating the Abyss Order, then so be it. Even Jean allows him this courtesy. Now, Dainsleif also questions whether Kaeya can break free of his past, which in this case should be his ties to the Abyss Order through his family
up, F5?
bloodline. This is a callback to Mona's horoscope reading of Kaeya, where she
This
says
is
that
it.
he thinks he's made a clean break with his past, but that it'll come back to haunt him and bring with it a very difficult choice.
So he is
Now,
not
given his
escape fate.
answers in the latest Archon quest, I am convinced that Kaeya chose Mondstadt over his Khaenri'ahn roots, but being involved with the Abyss Order has him towing a very dangerous line that would be very easy to cross, hence difficult choice. Now, part of the reason I think this is because Kaeya doesn't seem to have ever been
More like
to
CIA, the
Khaenri'ah.
Knights,
At least
true.
that's not the impression that I got. However, he was still able to recognize Dainsleif's eyes. So the only other Khaenri'ahn besides Albedo that we know he has contact with would have been his father, as his mother was never mentioned. Therefore, his father was very likely a full-blooded Khaenri'ahn, same as Dain. But his mother might not have been, and that would explain why his eyes are different from Dainsleif's. It also means that Kaeya's father may have been from a group of survivors that wandered the wilderness for hundreds of years after the Cataclysm. Since they were all immortal, it's not unreasonable to assume his father witnessed the events firsthand and then later had Kaeya with a non-Khaenri'ahn woman. However, if this is true, then that makes
Illegitimate.
Kaeya a lot more like Caribert, and by extension,
Yeah.
he
Yep,
should
there it
be
is.
a hilichurl by now. So why isn't he? If you ask me, it's because Caribert may have been born before the Cataclysm occurred, while Kaeya may have been born after. With the whole probably never been to Khaenri'ah thing.
Yeah.
Now, for the record, I don't believe the theory that Caribert is Kaeya, if only because Clotar's voice is different from the voice of Kaeya's father, which we did hear during the last Dainsleif Fest. They are
that's
obviously
true.
related because they're both Albrechts, but it's impossible to point at a specific placement to see their relationship exactly within a family tree.
That would be really interesting, though, if Kaeya ended up actually being Caribert. Like, I don't think it is either, but like, how interesting would it be if they found a way to reverse the hilichurl curse, and Kaeya was like the first successful version of that?
At least for right now, at time of recording.
Could be
Now,
Kaeya's
keep in mind,
grandfather.
there appears to be two curses.
That would also imply that Caribert got it reversed at some point too, which means they've escaped basically like the fate that gods gave them.
There's the hilichurl curse and there's the immortality curse, also known as the curse of the wilderness. Now, I am not sure if they're actually two different curses explicitly or if it's one curse affecting two groups of people differently. I'll refer to them separately, even though I'm not entirely convinced that they're two different things. Now, in regards to Kaeya, if he is a half-blooded Khaenri'ahn, then he should experience the hilichurl curse effects, whereas if he was a pure-blooded Khaenri'ahn, he'd be immortal like Dainsleif, right? He appears to be neither because he grew up with Diluc, meaning he was a child at one point and now he is an adult. And we haven't actually seen an instance where a Khaenri'ahn ages while under the effects of a curse, so we can assume for now that he's completely curse-free. Or that he had a curse and it got broken. Now, I know that Dane seems to insist that neither curse can be broken, but there were potentially 3 instances where the curse or curses were broken. Caribert, for example, regained his mind, which is not a complete curse break, but it does suggest it is not impossible for hilichurls to recover from their condition. Then we have Clotar, who actually died, which is something that's not supposed to happen to an immortal dude.
Sasuke.
And Clotar's wife had a human skeleton, suggesting that she never changed into a hilichurl or that she was killed before the transformation took place. I guess the third one doesn't really count.
Yeah, Clotar
much,
dying is interesting.
Anyway. It kind of helps illustrate that the curses may not have been effective immediately. Like, there might be a way to sort of stave them off. There are a few big differences between the hilichurl curse and the curse of the wilderness, however, and I want to take a second to talk about those. Non-pure-blooded Khaenri'ahns who were cursed were stripped of their minds while their bodies were distorted, turning them into hilichurls. And unlike those under the curse of the wilderness, hilichurled Khaenri'ahns are capable of dying, but they probably aren't tortured by it like the immortal Khaenri'ahns since their minds are already gone. This curse ends up being a bit of a kinder punishment since lacking the awareness of what happened to oneself implies that they will experience less suffering overall.
That's
Remember,
true.
Caribert did not last long after regaining his mind. Now, like I said, hilichurls can die, but not necessarily of old age. At least we don't have a case for that yet. It's more like at some point something switches inside of them and they find this calm, dark place like the chasm to just sleep forever and return to goo. We're going to talk more about
return to goo.
It's related to the crystal. But I say that it's unrelated to old age because there are implications that hilichurls can change form with age and become a minichurl or a samachurl or whatever. This suggests that normal hilichurls should be younger than their other counterparts, yet plenty of normal hilichurls were found in the chasm returning to goo. And now I'm kind of wondering if Caribert's explosion towards the end was also a very rushed return to goo. Pure-blooded Khaenri'ahns, on the other hand, were considered the greatest sinners, or the greater sinners, and therefore had the more punishing curse. Now, fun fact, this curse of the wilderness is likely referencing a real biblical thing. The book of Numbers, for example, talks about a group of Israelites who were forced to wander the wilderness for 40 years as punishment for their lack of faith in God, or rather, questioning God's judgment. There are a few other instances, if memory serves, but in this particular case, they were wandering through the harsh landscape of Sinai for these 40 years. There was very little food, water, or comfort, and all but 2 of the cursed people, Joshua and Caleb, would die during those 40 years as they appeared to be the only 2 who truly repented their sin of questioning the divine. Therefore, they deserved to live.
True.
So it's not really a curse of immortality in the Bible, but I still think that this fits the idea of eternal suffering quite well, as a punishment anyway. Imagine, as the traveler
That makes
suggests,
sense.
having infinite time yet no hope. That could only be something called torture. And that's probably why Clotar loses his mind after a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I don't really understand about all of this is why there were two punishments for what was essentially an entire race of people. Like, yes, there were some that had this particular bloodline, but Khaenri'ahns called themselves Khaenri'ahns if they all shared the same belief. And belief isn't something that you share by blood. So why is one bloodline getting cursed more or less than another?
Yeah, that's really interesting
That actually made me
too.
wonder if they're not two different curses. If they're actually one curse that manifests differently depending on your bloodline. Think of it as having a natural inbuilt resistance. Now keep in mind, this part is entirely speculative, but I've been wondering if non-pure-blooded Khaenri'ahns turn into hilichurls, then is it possible that at some point a pure-blooded Khaenri'ahn could turn into something else? Like, I don't know, an Abyss Herald? Or Lector?
Sasuke.
Or Mage? Like, think about it for a second. Hilichurls have a lot in common design-wise with Abyss Mages, and Abyss Mages are related to Heralds and Lectors and the like. We know that the Abysslings are all Khaenri'ahns, right? But what if they're all pure-blooded Khaenri'ahns? What if that's why they all have that same black star on their chests? The same as the Black Serpent Knights, the same as Clotar, the same as Halfdan? And what if the Abyssling?
I wonder if she's gonna talk about the Pyrolector that we met in was it in Encademia where we met them? Because I swear there was a Pyrolector where it was just some dude, like just some NPC. Thanks for the reset, I appreciate it. What was it? What would the first thing you do if you found out you're a Khaenri'ahn? Probably a lot of things that I feel like I'd be afraid to do. I don't know if there's anything I'd be afraid to do. Skydiving, maybe? Enjo. You got it.
Also have some kind of evolutionary cycle, just like the hilichurls. Abyss mages might be the equivalent of a standard hilichurl and might evolve, so to speak, into a lector or a herald or maybe something else that we haven't seen yet over time.
Oh no, not more abyss enemies.
The cryo-abyss herald spoke. I wonder if this transformation can diverge at some point. Let's say by accepting the call of the abyss, they would turn into an abyssling, like a herald or a lector. But if they reject it, perhaps they end up hollow, like a black serpent knight. As for Dainsleif, well, remember we talked about the abyss twin potentially getting a bija, and the bija might have been for him, and the bija is like this big crystallized memory fruit that can help someone recover when their brain goes bleh. That might be something that Danes had.
True.
Anyway, I'm just wondering. But I am also wondering about this one really weird...
We were watching Caribert Archon Quest Recap and Analysis Part 1.
...thing that Caribert said that really struck me as just odd.
Wait, stop. Another thing is Kaeya gets a shield at low HP with C4 just like Herald. Stop. Stop. Do not... Holy shit. Wait a second. That's like the most like metagaming thing. That's actually insane though. Like what if we end up finding out that this dude is destined to become an Abyss Herald? Keck, wait. What if we find out? That I would lose my mind. Also, thanks for the reset, Monkey.
When he was talking about how he felt, but just before he regained his senses,
I haven't seen the other right now.
Felt like he was hiding in a small room and he didn't want to leave. And this is the literal translation from the Chinese text. I did check. Now, out of context, this is pretty insignificant, but coincidentally, I made this theory like a way while back.
What's in the box? I could make an inappropriate joke.
On what may or may not be inside of the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles cubes. I will leave a link to that video if you're interested, but if not, spoilers! The conclusion I came to was that she had the souls of the people that were turned into hilichurls locked inside those cubes. So they're minds.
Monk of
minds
Christ.
Which, you know, that kind of sounds like sleeping in a dark room. A soul trapped inside of a cube. A mind that's trapped somewhere that doesn't want to leave. It's in its little comfy space somewhere in quarantine. Now, I'm not saying that this is confirmation of my theory or anything. I'm definitely not. But I do think the idea is worth revisiting again, especially since the first question Caribert asks when he wakes up is, am I dead? Okay, I know you guys are all really excited about this crystal that's floating in space, all chained up and weird, and oh my god, they didn't forget the defiled statue, but we're not going to talk about that today. Instead, we're going to wait for part 2, and for now, we're going to proceed to the rapid fire roundup. All those little tidbits that I want to share that aren't really worth analyzing, but I have things to say. Starting with the Loom of Fate. So it seems that Clothar decided to found the Abyss Order with the express purpose of finding a way to change the fate of his son. It is a little odd that he calls his son the Loom of Fate itself, like his body is gonna become the scaffold of a loom, but I don't think that was quite the intended meaning.
What is different in CN?
That this would be like Caribert's legacy or something. In any case, this seems to be a little bit different from the Loom of Fate operation that Dane is investigating, if only because the target seems to be different. Clothar was focused on just changing the fate of his son, but the Abyss Order may have expanded that goal to encompass some bigger ideas, with or without the help of Big Creepy Crystal Man. Either way, the objective appears to be seize the power of destiny itself. It's not really that earth-shattering of a revelation, but it's nice to have confirmation. Moving on, the infamous Death in the Afternoon cocktail. Now, this is a popular cocktail in Mondstadt, and it's a real cocktail too, you know? It's actually one made with absinthe. It's also Kaeya's favorite drink, and it appears to be favored by Dane as well, which makes it all the more funny to me how Kaeya ends their first meeting with an offer to buy him a drink later. I'm just wondering if they're both going to enjoy Deaths in the Afternoon. If that's a Khaenri'ahn thing, do all Khaenri'ahns like Death in the Afternoon?
All right, fair enough.
Drink? Which actually might be a valid idea, more so than you'd think. Now, you might remember that part of the whole medicine creation process included acquiring water at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Stop.
It's curious that they went out of their way to say 2 o'clock in the afternoon instead of 1400 hours when, you know, the in-game clock uses military time. I think they did this so they could draw attention to the idea that it's early afternoon when you're getting this water. It's in the afternoon, right? But 2 o'clock in the afternoon is 1400 hours in-game time. Now, you know how in some countries, like the US, skyscrapers and hotels will just skip the 13th floor because it's superstitious, like the 13th floor is bad luck?
Yeah.
Well, that's called tetraphobia. And in China, it's not the number 13 they do this with, it's the number 14. Because the number 14 in Chinese sounds a lot like the words for is dead or will certainly die, depending on the
I thought
dialect.
it was just 4.
So 1400 hours is Death in the Afternoon.
I heard something about that, but it was the number 4, not 14. But maybe I'm misremembering, but I swear it was 4 and not 14. I don't know. Maybe Ashikai's doing the research. I trust her.
No, I'm not saying there is a connection between this.
Oh, it's 4 for Japan. Okay, never mind. That's what I heard then. When I was in school, when I was really, really young, so 4 is Japan. Okay, that's what I thought. So when I was in school and I was really, really young, I don't remember a lot about it. I just remember being in like 5th grade when someone was telling me about how like 4 in Japanese was like superstitious or something. It was like super like, it's one of those like core memories where it's like a fact that like you can retain, but you don't know why you can retain it. And it's been so long since I heard it. So 14 in China, 4 in Japan. I feel like it's pretty easy to mix up if you're not from either of those places or speak either of the languages. 4 is death, 14 is dead. I see. How old am I? Too old.
This will certainly die at 2 o'clock in the afternoon water.
It's for both? Oh, is it kanji? I feel like I'm learning so much. All right, anyways.
Death in the Afternoon cocktail. But I do find it an odd coincidence considering how the first question Caribert asks after waking up is, am I dead?
Yeah.
But speaking of the medicine, there are 4 total ingredients, and the deadly afternoon water is only one of them. The other 3 ingredients are all imposters, weirdly enough. The Kalpalata lotuses are not lotuses, Sumeru roses are not roses, and the red mushroom looks a heck of a lot like a Rukashava mushroom, but definitely is not.
But just bloody.
Now, the Rukashava mushroom was supposed to be representative of Rukadevada's deceased body, which was weirdly, traditionally, offered to the academia by people and then later eaten by the sages inside of the sanctuary of Surasthana, which is a little uncomfortable to think about because that's also where Nahida was being locked up. So there are just sages going into her prison cell and
kind of
eating
weird
mushrooms that are supposed to represent the body of the former Archon, and
not really a fan of that.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Won't lie.
The fact that this lookalike mushroom, this red Rukashava mushroom, was growing in a field where Caribert's mother was buried might imply something similar, that those red mushrooms are related to the deceased body of Caribert's mother that then gets consumed in medicinal format.
Gross.
Anyway,
Disgusting.
I think it's a little ironic that it was humans that locked Nahida up and made it impossible for
Most
Clothar
noble
to
academia
actually get
sage.
a blessing from her via the Statue of Seven. Because had she been the one to bless the medicine instead of the creepy crystal man, I wonder how different things would have been. I wonder if there would have been an Abyss Order at all. Now, on a much lighter note, Caribert and Clothar are likely references to real historical figures. But
Yeah,
it's
they
kind
do
of
this a lot.
debatable which historical figures.
See, they do this a lot, but they leave it ambiguous enough. Like Ajax child has a younger brother named Tusar, or is it? Maybe it's not Tusar. Maybe it's another name. But I remember there was like parallels with Ajax, and that also raises death flags. There's also like basically all the Fatui, I believe, are based off of like a play, like a really old play. No, that's right. Child has a bunch of lore related to him too. So like they do this a lot with a lot of different characters, especially for like the important ones. Greek mythology for Ajax, yeah. But there's a lot of stuff like this. And you'll find it scattered throughout. If you're a big history person, a European history person, you're gonna love this game.
There is a man, Clothar II, who had a son,
Commedia
Caribert
dell'arte.
I. They were kings of the Franks, and the only real
Or is it
connection that I can
dell'arte?
glean between these two and
Dell'arte? I don't
Genshin
know.
is that
I probably
another
can't
one
pronounce it right.
of Clothar II's son had a wife from Toledo in Spain. The
Toledo?
same Toledo that was known as Tulay Tula, which is a city in Sumeru. However, it's possible that Caribert is referencing the Caribert of Laon, which would make him the maternal grandfather of Charlemagne instead. Now again, we're still looking at kings of the Franks, but roughly 200 years apart. Although Charlemagne was also the king of the Lombards and the emperor of the Romans. Basically, he founded the Carolingian Empire in the early 800s, and if you're curious about this crazy family tree of historical French monarchs, I will leave a link below. But I want to talk about Charlemagne for a second because Charlemagne is actually a pretty interesting connection in Genshin. He has a lot of connections to the Arthurian legends, as they were said to have been written based on him. Although I will point out that the Arthurian legends are debatably older than Charlemagne, but it is historically accurate to say that the two have frequently been equated to each other in some way, shape, or form. Now, this matters mostly because Mondstadt draws heavy inspiration from Arthurian legends. There's a sword stuck in the ground with a little kid named Arthur standing next to it, which is obviously supposed to be King Arthur and the Sword in the Stone. And then there's the Knights of Favonius compared to the Knights of the Round Table. And there's also historical figures like Parsifal, which is obviously Percival, right? Knights of the Round Table. And the historical figure of Roland, who should be the Bloodstained Knight, as well as Capitano. The Bloodstained Knight is Capitano. So, fun fact, make him from Mondstadt.
There you go.
Now, Roland is interesting because he references a tale called The Song of Roland, which is set in Charlemagne's Carolingian Empire. Laughing Man has a really interesting video on this, actually, so I'll leave a link to that if you're interested. Now, this time period, this rule of Charlemagne in the Carolingian Empire, and the, character of Roland and the Arthurian legends, they're all heavily connected, even anecdotally, to the search for the Holy Grail, which was initially done in the Arthurian legends through the knight Percival, which again is who Parsifal,
Wait, this game is just fate.
Historical figure, is based off of. But if you go back to Sumeru,
the Holy Grail can
you'll
change
find that there
fate,
are
chat.
actually some Holy Grail references, especially in regards to the Goddess of Flowers and King Deshret. Now, the Holy Grail often makes people think of the Knights Templar, which I know is only connected via like some contemporary myths and pseudo-conspiracy theories, but those same myths label them as some of the original Freemasons, and Freemasonry also has connections to Solomon, who has connections to Destrit.
Where is Merlin? We just haven't met him yet.
Sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself there. But if you are interested in a wacky big brain Genshin conspiracy theory involving Charlemagne and the creepy chasm crystal, then you are gonna love part 2.
Man!
That's what we're gonna talk about.
You got cliffhanger.
So while the credits roll and I thank all my lovely channel members for all their support that helps to make these videos possible, I will leave you all with this one last little observation.
Okay.
Has anyone noticed how much more insecure Paimon is getting from quest to quest? Like, I really started taking notes of it in the Perilous Trail quest, but it really went up a notch in the 3.0 Archon quest. And in this latest one, I don't know, she feels more insecure than ever. I don't know what it means.
We're
that
getting
Paimon's
closer to the
more and
truth.
more insecure with herself and with her relationship with the Traveler in every Archon quest that passes. But maybe she's becoming more and more aware that the Traveler will have to leave her one day. And when that day comes, she's gonna be all alone. I think when talk of Paimon betraying the Traveler comes up, it's always painted in a Paimon is a spy or Paimon is an agent of Celestia or whatever kind.
I just talked about this like a few days ago on stream. Emily, thank you for the sub. I appreciate it. Good to see you in stream. Okay, wait, no. So I was literally just talking about this the other day, where I feel like if Paimon does betray us, it's not going to be because Paimon wants to betray us. It's going to be because Paimon doesn't have a choice. Like, because it's literally impossible for Paimon not to.
Kind of way. But I wonder if she might act for more selfish reasons instead.
Oh?
I wonder if her deep-rooted fear of loneliness would encourage her to sabotage the Traveler's efforts to properly reconnect with her twin, because that would mean they'd leave and she'd be alone.
Ooh, that's an interesting take. That is a really interesting take. That Paimon would betray us because Paimon doesn't want to be alone. Rather than anything else, than some evil scheme or anything, it's just because Paimon doesn't want to be alone. That would be a hell of a mental health story, let me tell you.
No one deserves to be alone, and no one wants to be alone.
Or for food.
But that also doesn't mean that I'm just gonna stick around, because, you know, dang it, I got a lot of work to do. So you could maybe, like, I don't know, leave me alone, like, just for a bit. I got focus, and focusing is hard. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I know that
It's a really good video. If you guys haven't seen it, you should go like it. This is on Ashikai's channel. I'll link it again because we just watched it. Oh my god. Okay, so this is really good. I want to watch some of the island stuff too. I do want to dive deeper into Genshin lore. It's like the plot thickens every time I watch one of these videos. There's so much more we know about it. But yeah, I'll catch you guys later. Thanks for hanging out, guys.